Boom. I might delete the boom part.
Is there a mic drop sound?
I don't know.
What's that sound make?
I can just drop my microphone right now and see what that sounds like.
I can't drop mine because it's still taped in a box wrapped around with the cord.
I was going to say, if I didn't have to buy so many pencils for the upcoming school year, I'd try it with mine too, but... Welcome back to the Modern Lady Podcast. You're listening to episode 78. Hi, I'm Michelle.
And I'm Lindsay, and today we are looking at the link between the stages of perfection in our interior lives and the stages of perfection in homemaking.
We still believe, more than ever, that in a world fraught with chaos, our homes hold within their four walls the capacity for peace and order that our culture is desperate for. And that as homemakers, making the bed is not just about making the bed. It's about a constantly lived out charity and an attainable way of improving ourselves and the world, all from this often hard-earned comfort of our homes. But where does one begin, and where does one go from there? This is the aspect of house cleaning that we're chatting about today.
But first, if you enjoy this episode of the Modern Lady Podcast, please take a minute to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. Your review can help the Modern Lady stand out so that others may find us too. Your comments mean the world to us.
This week's shout out goes to Lori Legg, who reviewed the podcast on iTunes and said, quote, "I have listened to this podcast from the beginning. The tips Lindsay shares are my favorite. Great job, ladies," end quote. Well, thank you so much for your comment, Lori. Lindsay's tip of the week are some of my most favorite moments on the show too. Mouse brows, anyone? And if you would like to leave us a comment, you can do so on our website, www.themodernlady1950.wordpress.com, or you can leave us a comment on Facebook or Instagram, where you can find us at The Modern Lady Podcast. Speaking of which, before we get into today's chat, here's Lindsay with our Modern Lady Tip of the Week.
It's back to school! So Michelle, for today's etiquette tip, I thought it might be great if you and I could role play the proper way to respond when a fellow mom tells you about what her family has decided in regards to the education of her children for this year.
Oh, okay. Oh, involve interactive tip of the week. Okay,
it is.
I'm ready.
All right, so let's try this out. Michelle, what have you decided in terms of education for your kids this year?
Well, actually, Lindsay, we've decided that we're going to homeschool all four of our kids this year.
Wow, Michelle, that sounds great. I can tell that you and your husband gave this a lot of thought and have made the best decision for your family. Let me know if I can help out at all. Now let's try this again, but let's have Michelle give a different answer. So Michelle, what have you decided in terms of education for your kids this year?
Well, Lindsay, actually, we've decided to sign up for the online schooling that the school board is providing this year.
Oh, Michelle, that sounds great. I can tell that you and your husband gave this a lot of thought and have made the best decision for your family. Let me know if I can help out at all. Now let's do this one more time. Michelle, what have you decided in terms of education for your kids this year?
Well, actually, Lindsay, we've decided to send all four of our kids back to school this year.
Oh, Michelle, that sounds great. I can tell that you and your husband gave this a lot of thought and have made the best decision for your family. Let me know if I can help out at all. And let's take a bow.
I noticed it. I noticed a trend there. Yes.
And that's how it's done. That's our etiquette tip for the week. That's the answer you should give to any parent that tells you what they've decided for their families for this year. It is uncertain times, and there is no reason why you should weigh in on their decisions other than support and love, and just trust that your friends have made the right decision for their own family.
You may be wondering to yourself at this point, haven't we at the Modern Lady Podcast already said everything there is to say about cleaning your house? Apparently not. You all know that we all take great delight in constantly learning more and digging deeper. And when it comes to house cleaning, this week we hit on this really intriguing idea of applying our growth in homemaking to the stages of the interior life as you do. And so we're just going to start fleshing this out with you guys, right, Lindsay?
That's right. So, if any of you have ever worked with a spiritual director, and truly that is a rare blessing these days, or if you have read any kind of Catholic theology, you may have come across the 3 stages, or 3 states, or 3 ages of perfection. These are namely the purgative way, the illuminative way, and the unitive way. And you, like Michelle was saying, might not think that there's a link between those and scrubbing your toilets, but we found out that there is. So we are
Yes.
going to break those down, and we're going to tie it back into homemaking, and just realizing that, I guess, this whole life is a journey, right? We're going to go through these stages in all different ways, and it's all so much more connected than we ever imagined.
Right. And I really like the connection between these two because we do talk a lot about progress and
Mm-hmm.
journeying through all these things. But when it comes to something that could be viewed as very black and white, especially in the marketing age that we have, or the Instagrammable age, we see um, we don't often see those in between stages,
Yeah.
right, of our homemaking. We
Yep.
see like what we are staring down in terms of 5 baskets of laundry and perhaps an unkept home from the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go on Instagram and we see the magazine quality staged setups,
Yeah.
right? And so I really like this idea of bringing it back around to the stages and the phases of such a thing, and then linking it with something that will give it really deep purpose and meaning beyond just the scrubbing that's involved.
And the key here, just like with your spiritual life, is that you have to decide you want this. If you're going to enter
Mm.
into this, right, you have to really reflect on it, make this decision. Do I have the desire to grow in perfection? We will define perfection later and what that really means. And it's not the Instagrammable house.
Mhm.
But so, like in any of these journeys, you have to lock in and you have to make this decision. So, what we're talking about here is for someone who says, okay, I want to get better at this. Not somebody's like, hey, I'm fine with how things are. Those people can do that too. But we know from talking with so many of
Mhm.
you that you actually do want to level up here, that you do want to grow in perfection in your homemaking. And so this is something that is quite challenging, right? For you, Michelle, for
Mhm.
me,
Yep.
as we were
Yep.
writing it out. But it's something that we're both really interested in working towards and achieving. And it might take our whole life, just like the spiritual journey to perfection.
Yeah, and I think that's what really sparked this conversation between you and I, right? Is that we've both been kind of surprised and taken off guard
Hmm.
recently with a leveling up in our own housekeeping.
Yep.
And I just have to say, like, I think people may not realize that, at least for me, I consider you and I even at different stages
Mm,
of house cleaning, right?
yeah.
Like I look to you as a role model. I really feel like I'm in these beginning stages of learning so much about the ins and outs of cleaning. For example, like I'll just give you an example. It's just this past couple of weeks that I've realized that bleach is not as scary as I thought it was.
Wait a second, your hand didn't dissolve into a skeleton hand like on the bottle
That's
from
literally
our
what I've
children?
thought all of these years. Yeah. Well, it has the picture of the skeleton hand
Yes,
on
it's
the
terrifying.
bottle, right? And I'm like, ah, it's very, very scary. And then, through watching how you clean, and
Mhm.
especially through watching the Go Clean Co videos that I
Mhm.
recommended a few weeks ago on the podcast, I'm like, I think I need to try bleach. And
Mhm.
so I felt like a complete rookie again, like as if I had just stepped into my house for the first time as a young woman, learning the ins and outs of cleaning. I was taken right back there again, and I was thrilled to learn something new.
I
And so
love
this
that.
kind of sparked this conversation, right? We're like, wow, it really is like when you think that you've learned so much, it catches you off guard again, that you're like, wow, I actually knew nothing about this new level. And then you keep progressing. But actually, before we get into the definitions of the all the stages of the interior life and of perfection, I was reading this book called Journey to God, and it's written by Dan Burke, who I've also recommended in the past through the Divine Intimacy Radio podcast. He and his wife Stephanie do that. And this is a book about spiritual direction, but he also goes into, in one chapter, these different phases. And I thought it was really interesting that he started the chapter listing some common challenges that people have as they embark on this progress through the interior life. And again, linking it to homemaking and housekeeping, I can see the connections and thought it would just be great to just state them just in case, like me, you have had some of these thoughts. We can address it before we go any further. So, the first challenge that he lists is called scrupulosity. Now, scrupulosity, in the Catholic sense, is an obsessive concern with one's own sins, and it's a compulsive performance of religious devotion. So, what Dan was saying in this chapter is that it's actually really not healthy to obsess about our exact location on this journey, and that sometimes we're going to need to squint a little bit and just do the best that we can. So, it's phrased out really well, actually, in a book that he quotes by Father Eugene Boylan. The book is called Difficulties in Mental Prayer, and the quote says, "It is by no means necessary, at least as a general rule, to know on which rung one is standing. The important thing is to avoid standing still and to keep on climbing." End quote.
Now, Michelle, I bet you there could be something called
Mm.
scrubulosity, maybe for our
Oh.
our new cleaners out there. They might be like trying to
Yeah.
scrub all the things. And so same thing. Sometimes you have to
Okay,
squint a little,
yes.
even when you're just learning and be like, you know what? That's scrubbed enough.
Yes. Actually, side note, that actually happened to me
No
recently.
way.
Remember I was
Yeah.
telling you about the when you're trying to clean mold off the
Yes.
windowsills, the black stuff, and it was only through watching other people, professional cleaners, do it online that I realized that there is a point in which you
Yeah.
stop because it could be
Yeah.
stained, right? Whereas I would have spent far too long obsessing and focusing on that which has ceased to give
Mm-hmm.
merit, we'll say. Oh, we're just trying to link all
That's
of the
right.
religious
That's right.
terminology here to homemaking.
Scrubulosity.
Perfect. Okay, so another challenge that Dan talks about is assuming that progress through these phases is perfectly linear, like climbing a ladder, right? So getting through these stages, he says it's going to be a messy affair on the practical level because of our human nature and our condition. We're going to become distracted. We're going to fall off track. Life is going to happen. And we're to expect that as part of the process and not get bogged down by it.
Mm,
So I really liked that too, because I think we're going to map out these three distinct stages, but first of all, these are our own personal reflections of the connection between these two things, but also too, like it's not like anyone's there's no checklist, if that makes sense,
yeah.
right? Like
Yep.
there's no easy way to tell where you are.
Mm.
So that is my little introduction. Okay, purgative way. Let's
Here we
define it.
go.
Go,
All
Lindsay.
right. So this is defined in Catholic theology in this way. In this stage, you are actively working to give up sin and resist concupiscence. For those of you that's a new word, that is the innate desire we have to be led by the flesh. Let's say it that way. In all ways, to be led by our
Mm.
passions. In this stage, you actively nurse the virtue of charity. You cannot yet easily overcome temptations. There is continued interior warfare. You are working to resist and overcome passions. You're working on conforming to the will of God. There's an overcoming of a quote, natural shrinking away from pain. We'll go into that one a little bit. That one really jumped out at me.
Mm.
You are
Mhm.
purifying the soul in order to prepare it to receive extra graces. And then St. John of the Cross famously talked about the dark night of the soul, and he talks about two different nights, and
Mm.
these fit into this first stage as well, the purgative way. The first night is in the beginning, and it's those feelings of fervor and devotion. And then the second night is inevitable, and it's feelings of desolation, and yet purification happens during that night.
Mhm. So in the purgative way, it's this first night that you're talking
Both of them
about.
actually happen, both of those two nights in the
Oh,
purgative
okay.
way. Yeah, it's quite a journey.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I'm like, that seems like a wild swinging of
Mhm,
emotions there.
mhm. But you could see that, right, within your own journey that you
Mhm.
would
Oh,
start at the very
true.
beginning with that fervor and devotion, and even 2 weeks into a new cleaning schedule, you're in the second night.
2 weeks. Like, later that same
Mhm,
day.
mhm,
I'm like, "I am desolate." Yeah, I know, in talking about the purgative way, often these things are rooted in more of a fear or duty
mhm,
mentality than it is in a love and devotion mentality, which is what you're kind of aspiring
mhm,
to, right? And I totally identify with this in terms of cleaning. Like, up until very recently, I did see it as a duty. And there would be like some days here and there I'd be pumped up by it. Oh, maybe those are the feelings of fervor that you talked about. But more often than not, and this is transitioning to the opposite way, but more often than not in the beginning, it was just to do my
mhm.
duty to the house and to the family. There were like a bajillion other things I would have rather been doing. Right. And so as I've learned more, though, I do notice there being more of a love motivation.
So I love that the word purge is at the root of this word. And I think that that's where
Yeah.
99% of people who are deciding to take cleaning seriously, they're going to start with doing a major purge of their items. The truth is, one cannot clearly see until the things that we no longer need or the things that are holding us back are gone. So I think that that's a really good first
Mm.
step in this journey of deciding to take better care of your house. So again, I believe at this beginning stage that there are a lot of decisions that have to be made, right? So there's the actual physical decisions being made
Mhm.
during the purging part, but there has to be just a spiritual decision, an emotional decision made to give up on one's former lifestyle, a commitment to resisting the urge, the natural urge that I think most of us have to just slip back
Mhm.
into untidy ways and, dare I say, sloth. We have to make that decision. Now, as the purgative stage was defining, I think we can all agree that in this early stage, there are temptations everywhere. And many naysayers, this
Mm.
is something I'm seeing a lot more lately on social media when I see often very young women who have decided to take on homemaking very seriously. There is definitely a trend of that right now. And I see a lot of
Mhm.
naysayers jumping all over them saying, you're crazy for even trying to attempt this while you have young kids or at home, or you have a job outside of the home. How on
Mhm.
earth you can't be expected to do both and keep your house clean? Or you're homeschooling, you can't keep your house clean. And I feel
Mhm.
like those people just immediately they're temptations, they're that whispering in your ear and you just forget it. And the thing is too, I actually found this to be really interesting about temptation. You will be tempted to buy more things that you think you need to clean and to
Yes.
organize. And
Mhm.
this is a
Mhm.
trap. Like you might need a few things, but I think that that's just that voice saying, "Hey, just sit for a couple more minutes on Amazon. Like, just get down to work." You just ultimately need warm soapy water and a rag, right? If you're really going to get down to
Yeah.
it. And so I believe that also, like all of these temptations, that there can also be that feeling of warfare. And that can be within yourself as you are trying to, get your previous habits under control, or there can be pushback from your
Mhm.
husband who just doesn't get why you're trying to do this and doesn't want to help, or even kids, your own kids, even if they're teenagers, especially pushing back and just not getting why you're
Mhm.
all of a sudden have all of this fervor to get into cleaning.
Yes. And that can be really discouraging, right? When you
Yeah.
yourself are embarking on something new, you would hope that you have like overwhelming accolade and support and affirmation. And often it's either just simply not there. Like what may be obvious to
Mm,
us may not be obvious to other people that we live
yeah.
with. Or yeah, I can't believe like I haven't seen like these whispers online even to myself, but I know that you've come
Mm-hmm.
across them quite often and you tell me about them, but it really is like this understanding that I will meet resistance and that might be
Yeah.
painful. Like that is going to be an aspect of suffering that you will come up against. And so already steel yourself to persevere and fight through it and against it.
That's right. And that's that section in there where it was, again, a natural shrinking away from pain. And I really was struck by
Mm.
this because I think we all experience this, like we were just saying, and persevering and building new habits and cleaning your house, especially a house that's rarely been deep cleaned. It can be painful. And I'm talking emotionally and physically.
Oh,
Having
yes.
talked with so
Hmm.
many women over the years about cleaning, until you start talking about it, you don't realize how deeply rooted your views are on a clean house to how you were raised, houses you visited as a child. There is an emotional journey there. A lot of people I know are struggling under the weight of belongings and possessions that belong to their parents that have passed away, and they don't
Mm.
know how to get rid of those things. I
Hmm.
mean, there is a huge journey here that you're starting. And then physically, oh my goodness, you put in a 10-hour day cleaning your house, your legs are going to be aching to the point where you may have to take like an Advil. Your back is going to be hurting,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Those hard floors
Yes.
on your knees. Like we're not joking when there's pain here. And so it is our natural inclination to shrink away from that. And we have to actively overcome that. I mean, we're all very, very good at making excuses and ignoring the
Oh,
duty of the
yes.
moment by just shrinking away from it. So that one really caught me off guard. And then I thought about it, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is 100% true.
But you know what, too? Piggybacking on this idea of shrinking away from the
Hmm.
pain, there are a lot of things in our lives today that cause pain, but we're willing to go through
Hmm.
it because we know the outcome is going to be better for us in the
Yeah.
long run, right? Speaking of running, that's what I'm talking
Hmm.
about, like exercise,
Yeah.
right? Like we know, like even to start an exercise program, that's going to be painful. It's just part of everyone's common knowledge that you're going to feel it the day after, or even the day after the day after. And yet we're willing to undertake or undergo the pain to get to the other side of it. And that's kind of the same thing with house cleaning that maybe would help shift our mindsets a little bit, and rather than discourage us from even beginning because you know that there's going to be pain involved, just know that much like exercise, it's kind of a necessary part of the process, and that there will be something better on the other side of it.
Oh, totally. And that point, so right from the description of the purgative way, it says working to resist and overcome passions. And I think that that's what you're saying. So in this process, you have to
Mm,
work to
yeah,
resist your previous nature as you start to cultivate this new nature, and you have to force yourself to stick to these new routines. But as that happens, like what you're saying, you start to see the bigger picture that you can't see right when you start necessarily. That bigger picture becomes clearer and clearer as you move towards it.
hmm,
And so you really can, at that, as you start to progress through the stage, you start to feel more and more motivated. Now we do have to address again those 2 nights that we were talking about. So again, there is going to be that initial
right.
fervor and motivation, but then that second night will come. So let's say you have been running, let's use that again, or cleaning and all these things, and it's all going good and you see the big
Mhm.
picture. There will inevitably come a point pretty early on where you do think, oh, forget it. This is all pointless. Everyone's just going to keep messing it up, and you just are going to talk yourself
Mm,
out of it and say, it can't happen right now. But this moment, that night, that's the chance for huge growth. And this period of purification, that is there so that you continue to detach. You have to actually detach from those
mhm.
negative thoughts, and then you grow in fortitude and strength, right? Personal strength.
Yes, I love that. I love linking that idea with the duty of the
Hmm.
moment because, when I was talking about the fear and the duty being the motivation at the
Yep.
beginning rather than of love and
Yep.
devotion, even though those are like not the ideal motivators, and that you're hopefully going to progress to the other ones later on, if those are coupled with perseverance, they can provide a really healthy foundation for this growth and for the deepening of the motivations.
Yeah.
Okay, so it really sounds like the purgative way is like this fighting. It's like
Hmm.
trying to get through the gate, get
Hmm.
over the wall type of mentality. And I think a lot of the times when I'm reading books or hearing talks, or even motivational speeches not about the spiritual life, we spend a lot of time on the purgative way. I think that's where a lot of us are in a lot of
Hmm.
aspects of our lives. But the point of all of this is to progress, and there is a level up. So once you've kind of mastered the purgative way, you do grow into the next stage, which is called the illuminative way.
That's right. So when we look at the illuminative way, some of the points about that are that you're showing an advance in virtue. You are increasing your charity within yourself and to those around you. Your passions are under control now. You can avoid mortal sin, but you still struggle with venial sins. You're still distracted by imagination and desires. Michelle, I have to say, I laughed at that one because that's so, I'm not trying to put you in a box but I'm like, this is you and I. Still distracted
Yes.
by
Oh,
imagination and
so
desires.
much.
We're still there. Um,
Hmm.
More enlightened to spiritual things and virtue, occupied with progress. The
Mm,
fundamental virtue here is something called recollection, and that means a constant attention that elevates your thoughts towards God. There is a simplicity of spirit and a focus on right intentions. Now, this stage can take years, but
mm.
it there's a release from quote rigorous imprisonment, which is exactly how we were defining kind of that warfare and that struggle in the last stage.
Right.
There's a release from this, and there is a sense of greater freedom and satisfaction, and there is a joy that's more abundant than you've ever felt before. Now, this is not to say that there is not trials and suffering and attacks in this stage, but there is definitely a progress, a moving forward.
Hmm. When I hear you talking there about the trials and the sufferings and attacks, even at this stage,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of reminds me of growing pains,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like all of this work that we're doing, the intentional digging out of the places we've been, the trial and error in trying to adopt a new way,
Mm-hmm.
the failures we experience, the delayed gratification in and of
Mm-hmm.
itself, like nothing will be ideal on the first day. And I think that's a really tough pill for us to swallow in this age of instant gratification.
Right. Right, like the tap to clean on Instagram, right? I've done it. A lot of people
That's
do.
right.
Like we
Oh
just
my gosh,
expect that we
yeah.
can then boom tap your kitchen just like you do on Instagram
And
and
we
it's all
love those
clean.
so
We do
much,
love
right?
it. And then we're like, "Wait a
I would love
second.
to clean your house. Yeah.
Wait a
Through
second. Yeah,
Instagram.
somebody actually had to clean that in between those two photos."
Oh, that's awesome. But like you're also comforted, I
Mhm.
think, with consolations and favors from God in the spiritual life. And then also in the context of cleaning and homemaking, we're actually really fortunate that there can be a very real and tangible satisfaction when you finish a task. I
Mhm.
think it's one of the few things that you can seek to improve in your life that you'll actually see it and feel it rather immediately for as long as the process might be of digging yourself out or setting yourself on the right path. Like if you do say declutter a shelf, you will see that shelf decluttered as
Mhm.
soon as you're done.
Yep, absolutely. So the first point here again was that you're advancing in virtue. So when I was reflecting on that in terms of house cleaning or homemaking, obviously as a Catholic, I think to the four cardinal virtues, but I wanted to go beyond that. So I actually Googled a list of virtues just in the secular world, and I came across a
Hmm.
website called Virtues for Life, and I got all excited and tingly because as I'm reading the virtues, what secular people believed to be virtues, I'm like, these are all in homemaking. And if you can
Oh.
grow in these virtues, which we believe that you do as you move into the illuminative way, who wouldn't want to grow in these things? So some of these things, again, off the website, virtuesforlife.com, some of these virtues are acceptance, assertiveness, authenticity, beauty, caring, cleanliness, confidence, consideration, contentment, cooperation, detachment, determination, enthusiasm, orderliness, preparedness, purposefulness. Sorry. I thought porpoise and then it made me laugh.
You just threw that in there to make sure people were paying attention.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Purposefulness, self discipline. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So, maintaining a
Hmm.
routine and a relatively tidy house, it does, believe it or not, help you grow in these things. And if you don't believe me, honestly, try it for 30 days and then you can send me a little message. Let me know how it's going.
Oh my gosh, yes. So as you're going down the list, I mean, there's so many that I can't even pick one out
Hmm.
and comment on them. But what I like the language of this stage as well, it's so um encouraging to me because they're all like present tense. They're all moving forward. They're all like attaining language,
Yeah.
if that makes sense, right? And it's just, it really feeds this purposeful and consistent growth. So it gives you like a meaning and value to what you're doing. And I really love that. I get a lot out of that.
Hmm.
And the understanding that this is the point of constant change for the better or for improvement for me, it really does help give more meaningful perspective on the hours it may take to learn a new skill.
Hmm. Yeah, you're talking about progress, and so that point in the spiritual
Hmm.
side was occupied by progress, and this is so true. Then in the cleaning and homemaking sense too, you feel great. You have a deeper understanding of your home and your own
Hmm.
abilities, and you start to learn how long something takes to clean, and how much effort you have to put into that, and then you also learn the impact of your work. And the key thing here is you understand it even if no one else seems to care. It matters now to you.
Hmm.
And I think that that's a huge turning point for a lot of people who decide to embark upon this journey for themselves. And everybody benefits from it, but you have to make it about your own growth.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point because as somebody who really enjoys other people's affirmation of what I'm doing,
Mm,
that's a lesson that I've needed to learn in a lot of different areas
yeah.
is that it has to be what is pushing you forward on the inside,
Yeah.
right? That's going to continue the process and the progress. And if you're relying too much on the opinions and the words that are coming from people on the outside, that's when things can be so easily derailed.
Yeah.
It could be motivated if you get the right comment at the right moment from the right person.
Yeah.
But if you're relying on that, that's not going to help with your stick with itness.
That's right. And the stick
Hmm.
withedness and just not letting your day be run by your passions is that next step in this as well. You have those under control and you've grown in self discipline and a detachment from being ruled by how you're feeling now that day, right? Well, today, oh, I
Mm.
just can't. You're detached from that. It's not saying, we're not saying you're still not going to have those days. And it doesn't mean you can't feel what you're feeling. You just say, okay, you know
Hmm.
what? I'm exhausted, but this is what I'm going to get done today. So at this stage in the illuminative way, there are some jobs that you still just haven't really mastered, but there are a lot of jobs that you have started to figure out. So you haven't done it all
Mm.
yet, but there are a lot of your daily tasks that you actually do really have like under control.
Yeah, and I've noticed that too. Like as you build your repertoire almost. It's like learning how to cook even too, right?
Yeah.
Like as you start to really understand a number of recipes, they become part of your mental repertoire
Hmm.
and then you grow in confidence in your own ability to cook and you can expand and go out from there. I find the same thing true for housekeeping.
You're right. And that is, I think, in again, the theological part of it, the simplicity of spirit. I think you feel that you aren't
Mm.
at all as overwhelmed by the prospect of keeping your house as tidy as you'd like it, as you felt at the beginning stages. Now, again, you know what works, and you are rightly ordered now to just getting the job done. So there is a
Mhm.
lot of simplicity in this. Now, this stage can take years, as we said, in the spiritual life and in your cleaning life. And I think when I reflect back on my own life, this is the stage I've been in for about 12 or 13 years, since when I had my first baby up
Mm.
until about a year ago. And I believe that this is the mostly relatively tidy stage. And many
Mhm.
people never advance past the stage and are perfectly happy here. And you know what? In many ways, that's okay. But again, today we're here to talk to those who want to level up, who have that desire to keep trying to reach towards perfection. And again, perfection doesn't
Mhm.
mean having a spotless house all the time, but it means having a mind that is focused on your tasks, on what you need to do that day, and that you're no longer being ruled by your desires or your bad habits. It's having perfect control over yourself.
Mhm. This really reminds me of the Reasonably Tidy House,
Mm,
right? And for those who follow the blog Like Mother, Like Daughter, run by Lila Lawler and her daughters online, they'll be familiar with this term because it's theirs.
mm,
Um, and so, what Lila Lawler talks about in the Reasonably Tidy Home is just this idea, right? Where like you are comfortable in understanding your home and what it's going to take to make it efficient and run well and flow well. And I think, it's been actually quite a while since I've really in-depth read all the posts and the articles, and I encourage everyone to go look it up. Again, it's Like Mother, Like Daughter online. What I really get the sense of, though, is just having this sense and this peace about going through your day, making sure that things are in place in order so that you can live your life around, so that the housework grows from being all consuming to being like a means towards living the life that you actually want. It's almost like when we talked about leisure, like you're working towards the leisure part. Well, you're cleaning towards the being able to just use your house well. And this, I think, like kind of really fits in well with this illuminative stage and way of the cleaning process.
That's exactly the this idea of getting rid of the rigorous imprisonment and the sense of freedom that comes with this
Yeah.
stage, right? And so it might feel like in that first stage, if you're there right now, which again I think most people are, that rigorous imprisonment is never going to end. But like what you're saying, if you persevere, if you get things under control, if you figure out a routine that works for you, there is a great freedom. And I just
Mm.
experienced this when we had an unexpected medical emergency last week. And I had been on top
Hmm.
of my cleaning. And it was the first time in a long time that my house was actually more than, realistically tidy. Things were really clean. And then, boom, unexpected medical emergency, which means people having to possibly come in the house and take care of the kids. And I can just say that there was such freedom in me in the moment of scary stress of knowing that my house was tidy. Because I you
Mm.
are imprisoned by our mess.
Hmm.
And just like that as well, like we said in the spiritual part, joy is far more abundant in this stage. So I have worked with women who want to get a handle on their houses countless times. And every single time that I've talked with a woman about how to do one of these tasks, like how to close her kitchen, which I'll just say one of our listeners just really mastered the other night and shared on
Yes,
her
I
Instagram,
saw
right?
that. That was awesome. Yeah.
Made me so happy. Or, for the first time, a woman really truly deep cleans her bathroom. There is a massive feeling of accomplishment and pride in her home and joy. We all know what it's like to
Hmm.
clean out a closet and then open the closed doors throughout the day and just peek in and revel in the order and tidiness.
Okay, this brings us to the very last stage, the unitive way, and this is kind of like the accumulation of everything. This is the climax of what we're shooting for spiritually and in today's episode in terms of homemaking and house cleaning.
So, theologically, this means that you are now resting. I love that word, resting in God and enjoying a
Hmm.
relationship with Him. Your ego has dissolved and you have reached the state of perfection. And the quote here, the description of perfection means minds so drawn away from all temporal things that they have a great peace, not agitated by desires or moved by passions. There is a union of the soul with God by love and the actual experience and exercise of love that is perfect charity. And again, we talk often about love and willing the good of the other. That's what we mean by love here and the actual
Mm.
experience and exercise of it. There is the gift of contemplation that comes to people who reach the stage. Now, it's not everyone receives it, but many people do. It's a mystical gift of being able to understand and feel close to God in all things and to be fully aligned with His will. There will be, though, when it's least expected, a second night. And that comes with often a serious attack. So you're not out of the darkness here when you hit the unitive
Mm.
way.
So when you're talking about this second night
Mhm.
that comes, is this different from the second night that's in the purgative way? Like, is this a second
It
night,
is a second
as it
second
were?
night, yeah.
Okay,
Um,
I just need to
I don't
clarify.
know all of the details of it, but it's like it's another dark night of the soul, to use the language of Saint John of the Cross. And he was also,
Hmm.
again, the one who defined the other nights earlier on in this. So it can be an unexpected trial. There's going to be suffering and attacks. And the same can be said in your homemaking life as well. The truth is, you can do your absolute best pouring yourself out time and time again to keep your
Hmm.
house tidy and clean. But life happens and losses happen. And for the homemaker who reaches the stage, these challenges, though, don't break her. Because at this point,
Mm,
though, she knows herself, her strengths, her weaknesses. And this is my favorite thing. I think she has an intimate relationship and understanding with her own house and how her house
mm,
works. And she's confident and detached from the things that just don't serve an eternal purpose. Right? Again, it's this
mm.
moving away from temporal items and life and detaching from that. And now at this point, we talked about this new joy in the last stage, but at this point, her joy is unshakable, even in those darkest moments.
Right.
Now, I can honestly say I've started to have a few glimpses of this in my life. I'm not there yet. I've got a ton of work to do,
Okay.
but I'm working at it. But I have tasted it and it is beautiful. And in this, one truly is, again, to use the language that was used in the beginning, is dissolved and then is finally living for all of the quote right things in the right order.
Hmm. I love that. And the language of this way, like the resting, the
Mm, mm,
enjoying, the dissolved in,
mm.
this intimacy you're talking about,
Yeah.
to me, like it evokes an image. And this is just from my own personal mind, my imagination,
Hmm.
because
Still
in a
there.
knitted
Yeah.
way, you know, of like the we'll say the older women
Yes.
who are a generation or two ahead of me, who, when I go over, they seem to exude this.
Yeah.
Like, there is no hurrying around, there's no harriedness
Yeah.
or even a weariness. I would say even I do have a friend my own age too, a very close friend of mine. I was just commenting to my husband because we were at their house for dinner, and she invited our family over for dinner
Mhm.
when they're in the middle of a massive renovation of their kitchen,
Mm.
and so they've moved all the appliances to their laundry room in the basement,
Mhm.
and we ate there. And
Lovely.
even
That's
yeah,
great. I actually love it, yeah.
yeah, well, I walked down there to their new setup
Mhm.
of the dining area and everything, and I was like, "Your temporary kitchen is nicer than my current kitchen." Just the way she sets it up, like, that's what I mean to say, like, there is peace, there is calm, there is contentedness and gratitude to the way she moves in her space in her kitchen, and I'm glad we're recording this episode because, yes, that is one example of what I think we're trying to say here about this unitive way of just resting and enjoying this intimacy.
You're right. I love how you described that. And so, like in the spiritual life, very few people do reach this stage. And while I agree with you, I think we see it exemplified in older women. But those women, they
Mhm.
haven't merited it just because they've aged. They've merited it because they've worked on it. So it doesn't just come
Right.
with age, right? And so I feel like it's
Yes.
even harder to reach if you don't have
Mhm.
somebody to mentor you or to guide you. Like you really need to actively work towards this.
Mm.
Now, in this stage, you are, again, that word dissolved. I love this, dissolved fully into your vocation.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and there's a
Mm.
total detachment from your
I
own
love it.
ego. You no longer blame anyone, I think, for your own failures and shortcomings. And you have a great understanding of your own gifts. And for us Christians, we accept that our failures are our own and that our gifts are from God.
Mhm.
And I know how controversial that
Yes.
can sound at first for a non Christian. But if anyone unpacks that, even for just a few minutes, it's hard to deny how beneficial it would be for everyone to just accept their own shortcomings, no longer stewing in the past, carrying past hurts, thinking about how their mom cleaned, as we were talking about earlier, letting all that go. We can even let
Mhm.
go of what we thought our homemaking would be. And then we choose
Mhm.
then to focus on goodness, strength, and virtue as we detach from the past and focus on the future.
I'm loving everything you're saying about the unitive way. I just can't stop thinking, and it's because I'm reading a book about a mystic saint, Saint Gemma
Uh
Galgani,
huh.
that has my mind in this mystic mind frame when we're talking about contemplation and intimacy with God and everything. Is that a lot of them did possess the physical manifestation of levitation, like
Yes.
like they floated. And so despite, like, first of all, thinking how efficient could you be, like, zooming around your house, like if your feet don't even have to touch the ground. But also too, that's immediately solves the problem of all those hard to reach corners
Mhm,
up in your
mhm.
cathedral ceilings in your living room, right? So
Well, if there was ever a reason to try to hit the
there's
unitive stage.
there's always a practical element to our faith, right? But yeah, like on a more serious note, like just linking it to this understanding that we've been discussing this whole episode about cleaning and the unitive way, I think that that kind of floating feeling, as it were, though,
Oh, yeah.
and the secular version of that would be like, you're on cloud nine,
Yeah,
right? You just kind of feel high
yeah.
up in the air. Like this really does happen when we've reached that unitive way and unity with God and his purpose for your vocation and for your life and for the job at the moment, the duty of the moment, because you have detached from all the standards that you thought you needed to reach and like the oppression of comparing yourself with someone else. Like you really are in that restful enjoyment of what God is asking you to do in this moment. And it can make you feel like you're floating.
That's right. And so this is the perfection we're talking about. And so I think it's again important. We're going to review what the Catholic Encyclopedia at newadvent.org said about perfection and what their definition was, because I think it's really important to just focus on that. And that definition is minds so drawn away from all temporal things that they have great peace, not agitated by desire or moved by passions. And I want this, and you want
Mm.
this. And
Mhm.
we here at the Modern Lady Podcast, we don't usually suggest what you should want, but we honestly believe that really this should be a goal for everyone. Can you even imagine if everyone on earth was able to detach from temporal things, from everything that money can buy? If everyone could make decisions and be ruled by reason, prudence, and justice, and not be moved by their passions. Okay, so look, we are romantics. We aren't saying that we don't believe in love, but when we talk about the passions, we're talking about being dominated and ruled by our emotions. And whether we want to admit it or not, this does cause great agitation in our lives. The world isn't becoming any less stressful. And one look around shows us that most people are drowning under the weight of their own egos, and their own passions have overrun their ability to think critically. Fight back against the chaos with order, and we can promise you that you will find peace where you least expect it, perhaps in a well-organized closet.
Okay, it's time for our What We're Loving This Week segment of the show. So, Lindsay, what have you been loving this week?
Well, I was pretty vocal on social media a couple weeks ago about how we finally canceled Netflix, and I
Mm.
wanted to share with you that we signed up for BritBox, which, okay, you already
Oh my
knew, but
gosh. Yes, I
I'll share
did.
it with
But
everyone
it's
else.
amazing.
Yeah, I think I told you immediately that we got
Yeah.
BritBox. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
So from our beloved Lucy Worsley to Nigella Lawson with countless, and I mean countless, Judi Dench movies in between.
Oh my gosh.
My
There's
family,
the trifecta right
yes,
there.
yes. My family has a lot to watch now that these evenings are growing cooler. And, of course, it's inevitable that there will be some shows on there that don't align with our values. I just truly feel that there is a lot more on there that we can watch as a family. And Michelle,
Mm.
you know how I feel about a good family friendly murder show. And there's a lot
Yes.
more of those in England.
Yeah, the British certainly have that market cornered.
They
Yeah.
sure do. And then, I had to lay around and then rest a lot over the last week. And so I spent my days watching Cranford, which I know you
Oh,
love and
yes, I do.
which I can
Yeah.
recommend, and Nonstop Antiques Roadshow, which my children now role play. They play Antiques Roadshow with items
Oh,
from our
that's
house.
funny.
So BritBox all the way. I think we are going to get Acorn too. We can possibly talk about that in a future episode, but I'm a big fan of
Mhm.
BritBox already.
Oh my gosh, that's great because they've been trying to get me to sign up for
Of
years.
course
So
they
this is
have.
the personal testimony I need. Um, and if you like Cranford, I
Mhm.
wonder if they have the other Elizabeth Gaskell adaptations on there too.
Which
that
one?
I
Like, what's
also
another
really
one?
enjoyed. Another one is North and
Oh,
South.
I love North and South.
Oh, okay,
I've
yeah,
seen
it's
that
one of my
one.
favorites,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is Wives and Daughters.
Oh, I don't know that
Have you
one.
seen that one? Yeah,
No.
so also it's been a couple years since I've watched it, but I
Mhm.
remember really, really enjoying that one too, possibly on par with North and South.
Ooh.
So if you
Okay.
liked Cranford, yeah,
Mhm.
look up the other ones.
Awesome. So what have you been loving this week?
So I can finally talk about a book that I finished a few weeks ago, but I still think about it from time to time. I just
Mhm.
had to talk about Go Clean Co. first on
Mhm.
Instagram, priorities.
Mhm.
So this book, it's What Alice Forgot by
Mm.
Leanne Moriarty. So it follows the story of Alice. She's a 40-year-old woman who wakes up after fainting at a spin class and bumping her head and realizes that the last 10 years of her life are just gone from her memory,
Mm.
and that she's realizing her life, it looks dramatically differently than what she remembers. And so the book follows her process of trying to reconcile who she knows she is with who she has apparently become
Mhm.
in this last decade. And I really loved it because it was refreshing to read about a character who has to grow to understand that things aren't pretty or good, and that some of the things that she has done has negatively impacted the people around her, but that she's determined to fight really, really hard to save those things and to redeem them. Like, she fights for her marriage, she's fighting for her family, even though she doesn't exactly know what went wrong in the first place. So I found it really easy to root for Alice, and I like
Mm.
that in the story. Now, I will say I was starting to get a little bit nervous nearing the end that I wasn't going to get an ending that I was happy with, but at the end of the day, without giving away too much, I was content with how things were summed up. So I think it's a safe read if you can't handle anything too jarring right now, is what I'm trying to say. It was good. What Alice Forgot by Leanne Moriarty. Okay, that's going to do it for us this week. If you want to get in touch and chat with us about our topic today, you can find us on our website, www.themodernlady1950.wordpress.com, or leave us a comment on Facebook or Instagram at The Modern Lady Podcast. I'm Michelle Sachs, and you can find me on Instagram at MMSachs.
And I'm Lindsay Murray, and you can find me on Instagram at Lindsay Homemaker.
Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and we will see you next time.